Hey guys, everything new under the sun. The Great American Bankruptcy, or collapse if you will, economic collapse, depression, however you want to label it. This is the Great American Bankruptcy of probably 2019, somewhere around there. This is the usdebtclock.org. In the top left corner, you can see the national U.S. debt. $21 trillion heading upwards. Everything is heading upwards. Something interesting to note, I think it's on this one, is the value, the historical value of gold and silver. Let me see if I can pull that up for you here. Let's see. Yes, all right. So in the bottom right corner, you can see the dollar to gold ratio. So this shows basically that silver should be about $571 per ounce in the very right-hand column there. I can't point to it. And gold should be about $4,400 an ounce, where I think it's like $1,200 or something right now. So those are the metrics which give you an idea of really where gold and silver should be. But this is all with the understanding that it's a manipulated environment and manipulated environment, and the U.S. Debt is absolutely unsustainable. And the deficit itself, the deficit is how much over the budget each year that the U.S. spends. Apparently, it's just under $1 billion there, 707. Well, you can read that yourself. It's a large number, a huge deficit that the U.S. is running now. Now, I'm no economist, but I look at these things and I have some understanding of of what happens. I've listened to enough talking heads, economists, people who are in the know, and they say this is unsustainable. They can't continue to pay the interest on the debt forever and never paying down the principal. It's just like you having a debt. If you don't have enough to pay the interest on the debt, well, you got to go bankrupt. And that's one reason why they want to keep interest rates low, because as interest rates rise, that means the interest on the $21 trillion of debt also rises, just like interest. If interest goes to 6% on your credit card, or 8% or 10%, you have to pay more each month on whatever balance you're holding there. So it's a significant thing, and I want to take a look at the cycle of empires. This is a pretty interesting one. Let's see. This is a picture I wanted to take a look at. And I've covered this before, but this is another interesting one with kind of date ranges on it. So you start at the outburst in 1806 in the bottom left-hand corner there at number 1. That's the outburst as the economy just starts getting into order. Number 2 is the conquest. Number 3 is commerce, where commerce picks up and people start buying and selling significantly with the fiat currency, with the fake US dollar. Number 4 is affluence, where people are really starting to get rich with that. Number 5 is intellect. Number 6 is decadence, and that's literally, people are just, they have so much money, they're just starting to decay. They're not working as hard anymore. They don't see value for their work anymore, just because there's so much money around. Number 7 is the decline of the civilization. And then number 8 is the period in which the collapse occurs. And then they start the cycle all the way over again. They start with nothing and they start building the economy again. And it goes through commerce and then affluence, where everybody's rich again because the economy is doing so well. And then intellect, and then decadence, where people are just have so much money that they're living rich, but they can't really afford it because they're all living based off debt and credit. And then you start seeing decline of civilization again. So we're in a period of economic collapse, potential collapse. This is the cycle of fiat currencies. This is a cycle of empires as well. This is really this article is showing the cycle of empires throughout history. All empire cycles in history have followed the same 8-phase process. This as it relates to superpowers, but I'm also relating it to fiat currency, because that's really in large part due to that. Phase 1 is outburst. That's pioneers. Phase 2 is conquest. That's the soldiers conquering. Phase 3 is commerce, the merchants. Phase 4 is affluence. The businessmen are getting rich. Phase 5 is the intellectuals. Phase 6 is the athletes. Phase 7 is musicians, apparently, and collapses actors. This whole article goes through speaking about the time ranges. Affluence, the roaring 30s, lots of money, etc., going through there as people were awash. And then you look at the various things. Decadence, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I think this is maybe, well, as it relates to the actual rise and fall of empires, maybe this is actually correct. As it relates to money, I think this is maybe time shifted a little sooner than it should. But look at this, 2001 to 2021, phase 8, collapse, financial bubbles start collapsing there. And then 21 to 23, year 21 to 23, projected end of U.S. supremacy. And that's exactly where it's going. That's where Bible prophecy says it's going. So that's pretty interesting stuff about the cycle of nations. It's a whole subject you can study. But let's take a look at this. This is a Zero Hedge article about Trump, the hatred of Trump and his policies and tariffs and all the other things he's doing. The title is Lynn, There Will Be a Financial Crash and Trump Will Be Blamed. And I want to go down to the bottom of the article where it actually speaks to this, if I can find it here. It says, so related to the anger of Trump, etc. Now imagine, if you will, how the anger will be magnified against Trump when Trump's trade wars and tax cuts are blamed for the next Great Depression. Today, the Congressional Budget Office announced that growing U.S. budget deficits, which we spoke about, have pushed public debt to 78% of the nation's gross domestic product. This, even as, so the gross domestic product is the amount of profits, effectively, the nation creates for a year. That's how much debt the U.S. has. So it's approaching 100%. So it's, if the U.S. puts out $21 trillion a year in gross domestic product, and the debt is there getting close to it. I'm back. I had to close my door there. So the debt is getting close to how much money we can, or the United States rather, can actually make in a whole year. So if they took all the money that the U.S. produced in a year, they could pay off the debt basically. But that would mean no food for anybody, no clothing for anybody, no profits, no etc. Well, this even as investors grow increasingly anxious over rising interest rates, which the Federal Reserve is doing, and bank stocks surpass their record longest losing streak ever. Of course, the doubling of the nation's debt under Obama or the Federal Reserve's 6 rate hikes since Trump's election will not be blamed. It's not going to be blamed on a past president. The current president is always blamed, and it's not going to be blamed on the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. They're doing that because one reason is they need a place to claw back when the economic collapse does occur. They need to be able to decrease interest rates to help buoy up the economy again when the next recession or economic collapse happens. So that's kind of why they're raising it by quarter points. It says, make no mistake, there will be a financial crash and Trump will be blamed. You can take that to the bank. It's only a matter of time, it says. After the crash, the support for Trump from the political right will fade like the light of day after sunset, while the vitriol to the left will rise and crash over the land like blue tsunamis under the full moon after an ocean quake. So this is, part the left wants an economic collapse to happen because they can blame it on the right, they can blame it on the conservatives, and gain power again. All they have is hatred for Trump and his supporters now. It will only grow worse, and they are everywhere, it says. So pretty interesting stuff. That's from, what's her name, Loretta Lynn? I forget what her name is. But anyways, yes, an economic collapse will happen. This is a Zero Hedge article, by the way. Well, looking at this one, the U.S. economy collapse. What will happen and how to prepare? I'm not going to go through all this, but if a U.S. economic collapse occurs, it will happen quickly. No one would predict. I think that's wrong. I think a lot of people are predicting it. This is a January 26th article from 2018. It goes on, that's because the signs of imminent failure are difficult to see. I don't think they're difficult at all. For example, the U.S. economy almost collapsed on September 17, 2008. That's the data for the Reserve Primary Fund broke the buck. It goes on. Panicked investor withdrew a record 140 billion from money markets. Fortunately, the Federal Reserve Chairman and U.S. Treasury Secretary noticed the signal that people were taking their money out and knew what it meant. Ben Bernanke was a Great Depression scholar. Hank Paulson was a Wall Street veteran. Their bailout plan, the whole big bailout and TARP funds and quantitative easing after the 2008 financial crisis, was to basically prevent a complete and total depression. What did they do? How did they actually resolve that? What was the actual basic definition of what they did? What they did was they printed money out of thin air. It was not backed by gold, not backed by hard work, not backed by assets. They just printed money out of thin air. And they did that. They could get away with that because they're the world reserve currency. What will happen if the U.S. economy collapses? Well, if the U.S. economy collapses, you would not have access to credit. Bank machines would be down. Banks would close. Demand would outstrip supply of food, gas, and other necessities. If the collapse affected local governments and utilities, then water and electricity would no longer be available. Now, I'm in the country. I have a well, although that well requires electricity for the pump to run to get that water. So, thankfully, we live by a river and we do have springs on the property. But most people do not have access to that. And so when the electricity grid goes down because no one's paying for it, because the government collapses, you're going to be without food and water. And you can't live, more than 3 days without water. And what is it, 3 weeks without food, something like that? As people panic, they would revert to survival and self-defense modes. They would be desperate. This means that there'd be roving gangs of people, hungry people, looking for food and water and to basically steal whatever you had because they're desperate at that point in time. It's not because they want to go around and be violent. It's because they're desperate. It's either they're going to die or you're going to die, effectively. And so this is quite literally Mad Max territory we're talking about. The economy would return to a traditional economy where those who grow food barter for other services. So if you're growing food, if you're able to grow food, then you could create a little local economy. The U.S. economic collapse would create global panic. Demand for the U.S. dollar and U.S. treasuries would plummet. Interest rates would skyrocket. Investors would rush to other currencies, even gold. It would create not just inflation, but hyperinflation, where you'd be carrying around wheelbarrowfuls of U.S. dollars to buy a loaf of bread. That's exactly what's occurring in Venezuela right now. That's what has been occurring in Venezuela for the last couple of years. Their bolivar is absolutely worthless, and that's what's going to happen to the U.S. dollar once it ceases to be the world reserve currency. When would the U.S. economy collapse? If the U.S. dollar rapidly loses value, it would create hyperinflation. A bank run could force banks to close. The internet could become paralyzed with a supervirus, preventing emails and online transactions. Terrorist attacks or a massive oil embargo could halt interstate trucking. Grocery stores would run out of food. Widespread violence would erupt across the nation. This is what is happening in Venezuela. It is a poster child of what happens when hyperinflation takes hold, when your economy crashes. Some believe the Federal Reserve, the President, or the international conspiracy are driving the United States toward economic ruin. Certainly, I think the left would be happy if the U.S. economy died under Trump. But also Russia and China are also interested because they want to become superpowers. They want to remove the U.S. from world superpower status. And so this could also be used as a weapon of mass economic destruction. The article goes on here how to prepare. Basically, number one, you need to know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior because he's coming back soon, and the Bible speaks of troublesome times coming, persecution coming, scary times coming, and we may die for our faith in these last days as people are getting desperate and, in fact, start blaming Christians for everything that's happening, interestingly. Beyond that, God gives us brains. We need to be wise. We need to store up food, a little bit of water. For the time when times get tough, we can feed our families, and we should also have enough to feed our neighbors in times of trouble, so we can share the good news to them and feed them at the same time during this. So you need to be prepared. Ultimately, this is coming, regardless of whether the Lord returns or not. World empires come and go. Fiat currencies come and go. And we're at the end of that cycle of things. So this is coming soon. I think this is going to happen in the next couple of years here. I think we're only about 3 years out from the start of the 7-year tribulation. And that means we're going to be moving into a different world economic currency, the mark of the beast system. That means the US dollar as a world reserve currency needs to cease from being a world reserve currency. That likely means the collapse of the United States as a country. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll leave it there. Be prepared. Know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And we'll see you in the next video.